What's happening? Get up, man. The war started. Move, grab the guns, and blast them back into the ocean. War? Oh no. Fine, fine, just let me put on my uniform and. Hold on. Oh, hey Charles. Why is nobody at the cannons? Cannons? What are you talking about? Oh, the war? We already handled that one. It's done? Yeah, mate. Anyway, are you playing this hand or not? This man is about to lose everything he owns. Well, a bet is a bet, sir. No, wait. Can I just go back to sleep? We begin in the late 1800 segundos. And we begin in Britain, a country of factories, a country of money, a country of cities packed so tightly that even the rats probably needed roommates. And do you know what Britain also had a lot of? Colonies. How many colonies? Too many to count comfortably. At one point, the British Empire controlled around a fifth of the planet's land. It was the largest empire humanity had ever seen. And inside that massive empire sat one very small but very important island, Zanzibar. Zanzibar lies off the coast of what is now Tanzania. And in the 19th century, it was not just some random island with nice beaches. It was one of the biggest trading hubs in the Indian Ocean. African traders, Indian traders, Arab traders, Asian traders, all passing through the same tiny island. So for Britain, Zanzibar was useful, very useful. Controlling it meant stronger influence over trade in East Africa. But trade was not the only issue. There was also slavery. Now, to be clear, Britain was not trying to bring slavery there. At this point, Britain was trying to end it. Around the early 1800 segundos, the British had reached a shocking moral discovery. Maybe kidnapping people, selling them, tearing families apart, and forcing them to work until they died was not exactly civilized behavior. After pressure from abolitionists like Thomas Clarkson, Granville Sharp, and William Wilberforce, Britain passed laws banning slavery across its empire. And this created a new national mission. The British now saw themselves as the people who would stamp out slavery around the world. Equal rights for all men. And maybe, one day, after a few hundred meetings, women too. Which brings us back to Zanzibar. Because even though Britain had banned slavery, the Sultan of Zanzibar and many wealthy traders on the island had not. That was a serious problem for Britain. First, because slavery is evil. Second, because slavery was now illegal under British imperial policy. So Britain had to deal with it. The simple solution would be to walk onto the island and tell every powerful slave trader, "Congratulations, your entire business is now gone." That would technically solve the problem. It would also technically cause riots, rebellion, and probably a very unpleasant little war. And nobody wants to accidentally start a war, obviously. So Britain chose a quieter method. Enter Admiral Harry Rawson. Rawson was in charge of Britain's Cape of Good Hope naval station, which basically meant he commanded the British ships responsible for protecting British interests around southern and eastern Africa. The idea was simple. Instead of immediately forcing everyone in Zanzibar to stop trading enslaved people on land, Britain would patrol the surrounding seas. British ships would intercept slave ships before they reached the island. No ships, no trade, no trade. No profit. And with enough pressure, the slave trade would slowly choke itself to death. Honestly, not a terrible plan. But there was one problem. Wouldn't the Sultan of Zanzibar be angry about this? He would. If he had any real power, because when Britain took control of Zanzibar, they did not exactly walk into the palace and say, "Hello, respected ruler, we would like to take over your island and use it to expand our empire. Please sign here if that sounds fair." No, it went more like this. "Hello, Germany." "Oh no. Hello, Britain. I see you are also grabbing parts of Africa. Yes, indeed. Here is my offer. You take that piece, I take this piece, and that piece, and this bit, and that other bit, and also this island." Germany then thought very carefully, because Britain had a very large navy, and Germany did not feel like testing whether Britain was joking. So Germany said, "You make a persuasive argument. Deal." And just like that, Britain got Zanzibar. Then Britain turned to Sultan Hamad bin Tuwaini. "Hello, Sultan. We own this place now. Any complaints?" The Sultan looked at the British ships. Then he made the intelligent decision to not complain. But wait, if Britain controlled Zanzibar, why was there still a Sultan? Because removing him outright could have caused unnecessary fighting. And again, nobody wants a war. So Britain kept the Sultan in place. To the people of Zanzibar, it still looked like they were being ruled by their own leader. In reality, the Sultan was now basically a British-approved puppet. As long as he followed British instructions, everything stayed calm. And then he died. How? Very suddenly. And by suddenly, I mean he was probably poisoned by his cousin, Khalid bin Barghash. A royal relative poisoning someone to get power? Impossible. History would never repeat that trick. So now the Sultan was dead, and Britain needed a new puppet. There were two main choices. First, Khalid bin Muhammad. He was pro-British, he was anti-slavery, and Britain liked him. Second, Khalid bin Barghash, the same man suspected of poisoning the previous Sultan. Also not very fond of Britain. Why did Khalid dislike the British so much? Because this was not the first time he had been pushed aside. Years earlier, when his father Sultan Ali bin Said died, Khalid believed the throne should go to him. He was the Sultan's son. He was royal. In his mind, the job was basically already his. But Britain looked at him and said no. They preferred Hamad bin Tuwaini instead. Khalid did not take this well, so he rushed into the palace, barricaded himself inside, and demanded the throne. Fortunately, Britain managed to talk him down before things turned bloody, so the crisis ended without a war. But now the exact same problem had returned, and Khalid was not planning to lose the throne twice. When he heard that Britain supported Khalid bin Muhammad, he moved fast. This time, he did not storm the palace alone. He brought more than 3,000 supporters with him. Men, women, guards, servants, loyalists, everyone who thought Khalid should rule. They entered the palace, locked it down, and prepared to resist. At first, Britain tried diplomacy again. They asked Khalid to leave. Khalid ignored them. They asked again. He ignored them harder. This was a major issue for the British. They needed a sultan who would support their policies, especially the end of slavery. And Khalid was not that man. So after one more polite attempt, probably with less patience and more sweating, Britain called Admiral Harry Rawson. So, Harry, there is a man in the palace. He refuses to come out. Could you maybe persuade him? Of course, I will arrive in the morning. Also, for completely unrelated reasons, please remove all British citizens and merchants from the island. No reason, just good housekeeping. See you tomorrow. The next morning, 8 o'clock, Admiral Rawson arrived with 5 British warships. He sent Khalid a final warning. You have 1 hour to leave the palace. If you do not leave, we will remove you the traditional British way. Khalid responded with one of the boldest bad decisions in history. He said he had no intention of leaving, and he did not believe the British would actually fire. That is a dangerous sentence to say to the British Navy. Rawson basically answered, you should not gamble your life on that assumption. 1 hour. Do not be stupid. Then Rawson returned to his ships and waited. Khalid stayed inside the palace. His supporters stayed with him. And as the deadline approached, there was no sign of surrender. Instead, the British noticed something interesting. The Zanzibari defenders were preparing their only shore battery. They also moved their single warship into position near the British formation. A very curious thing to do when you are supposedly not starting a war. Then 9 o'clock arrived, and the British decided that the conversation was over. At 9:02 in the morning, the British gunboats, Raccoon, Thrush and Sparrow opened fire on the palace. The first shot from Thrush destroyed Zanzibar's only working shore battery almost immediately. So there went that plan. Inside the palace, Khalid's supporters had built barricades and prepared for a fight. But wooden defenses and palace walls do not do very well against naval artillery. High explosive shells tore through the building. Fires broke out across the palace. Smoke filled the rooms. Thousands of people were trapped inside a collapsing, burning structure. 3 minutes after the shelling began, Zanzibar's one warship tried to fight back. It fired on HMS St. George, the large cruiser carrying Admiral Rawson. Unfortunately for them, the ship's weapons were outdated. Their shots did almost nothing. The British response was simple. St. George fired back. After about 4 hits, the Zanzibari warship sank. A few minutes later, 2 small steam launches tried to attack the British gunboat Thrush with rifles. Against the warship, that went exactly how you think it went. They were destroyed almost immediately. And with that, Zanzibar's naval defense was gone. What followed was roughly half an hour of non-stop British bombardment. More than 500 explosive shells were fired into the palace area. The building burned. The defenses collapsed. The people inside were devastated. Finally, one Zanzibari climbed onto the roof and pulled down Khalid's flag. That was the signal. The fighting was over. And that was the entire war. The Anglo-Zanzibar War. The shortest war in recorded history. It lasted about 38 minutes. In those 38 minutes, more than 500 Zanzibaris were killed or wounded. On the British side, only one sailor was injured. Possibly by doing something heroic. Possibly by dropping something heavy on his foot. History does not always give us the details we deserve. Either way, the war was over before most people would finish breakfast. It was one of the shortest and most one-sided conflicts ever recorded. But what happened to Khalid? He ran. 5 minutes after the bombardment began, he left the palace with his wealthier supporters. Then he fled to the German consulate for protection. So while thousands of his followers were being crushed inside the palace, Khalid was already looking for a way out. Not exactly inspirational leadership. After the war, he escaped into German-controlled East Africa. There, he lived comfortably for years, until World War I. When Allied forces moved against German territory in Africa, Khalid was captured. The British then sent him into exile on St. Helena, the same remote island where Napoleon had been sent. Khalid later wrote letters to Winston Churchill asking to be allowed home. Churchill's answer was basically, no. Then Khalid was sent to Kenya, and that is where he died. Meanwhile, back in Zanzibar, Britain wasted no time. About 20 minutes after the fighting ended, Hamud bin Muhammad became Sultan. He was the British-backed ruler they had wanted from the beginning, and under him, slavery in Zanzibar was fully abolished. So that is the story of the bizarre 38-minute war. A war caused by imperial power, slavery, royal ambition, and one man who thought 5 British warships were bluffing. They were not. Subscribe.